This ceremony comes at the end of a successful restoration project embarked upon approximately 18 months ago through the collaborative efforts of the Office of the Prime Minister, UDCOT, and the Incorporated Trustees. As a member of the diocesan team, which worked with our two partners on this project, I would like to express our appreciation for the excellent team spirit which was exhibited by all partners. Some of you may not be aware that by our collective efforts, we have repeated the very gesture which gave rise to this grand dam, Hayes Court. Our records indicate that a building was conceived as the house for the Anglican bishop in 1904, but construction of the building, now known to us as Hayes Court, began in 1908 with a donation for the site by two anonymous gentlemen. And here we are today in the presence of so many persons who have, by their generous support in a variety of ways, made this handover ceremony possible. Your contribution is appreciated, and hence we thank you for accepting this invitation to witness this event, marking the completion of the restoration of this historical home of the Anglican bishops since 1910, a structure of which we can all be justifiably proud. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Incorporated Trustees, welcome to this official handover ceremony of Hayes Court, which has been refurbished and restored to its original splendor and can now take its place proudly among the Magnificent Seven. Welcome all.
Thank you, Mrs. Frederick. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now welcome the Right Reverend Claude Berkley, Bishop of Trinidad and Tobago, to bring us his remarks.
Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, honorable members of the Cabinet, members of Parliament and the Senate, His Worship, the Mayor, Alderman Joel Martinez, Mayor of the City of Port of Spain, members of Parliament and of the Senate seated and present here this morning in our front row, Minister Young and Minister Dino Briga, members of the clergy, Mrs. Jennifer Frederick, trustee, other church officials, Mr. Noel Garcia, Chairman UDCOT, and members of the UDCOT board, Mr. Mika Charles Phillip, CEO, UDCOT, UDCOT management and staff, and contractor, the Bishop Anstey High School Choir, captains of industry and commerce, specially invited guests, members of the media, members of the National Public Viewing live on TTT, UDCOT's Facebook page, and listening on I-95.5 FM. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I wish first to join the trustee in welcoming you to this auspicious occasion of the handing over ceremony of the Hayes Court, the official residence of the Bishop of Trinidad and Tobago. In a certain place, everything like this is auspicious, especially when you have had to suffer many years of indignity, insult, rebuke, and otherwise for its condition, even if you might have come long after, but you are the one in the spot, you take the heat. All the above named participants have allowed me to smile this morning and to have a heart full of joy and hope and peace. On behalf of the Anglican community, I would like to thank the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, Mr. Noel Garcia, and the UDCAT board, Madam CEO, Ms. Tamika Charles Phillip, and members of management and staff, contractors, as the case might be, and workers on the one side. And the trustees and the committee, a solid core of donors, well, not unlike the anonymous donors who started the whole thing going, members of the church who made and sold tulum, sugar cake, ice cream, and so on for the collaborative action and outcome, which is this morning's grace and splendor, the restoration of his court. I would like you, in spite of the fact that we don't know who they all are, to put your hands together in a show of appreciation for this very expressive collaborative venture. When I came to office in December 2011, there was a survey which indicated restoration in the sum of $24 million. My immediate thought was that we should push it down and build something of modern elegance for about $6 million. I was thinking economics and perhaps commerce. And a group of ladies from a particular parish, of which we shall not mention, overheard my intention. It really was not a solemn and serious intention. It was a strategic maneuver. It was intended as a strategic maneuver. But they heard of it, and they came to my office just off there, and they solemnly scolded and warned me that no such thing was to engage my mind. And from that very day, that it were to be driven henceforth with very good old-time English, Latin, and the particularities of the language of persuasion, which made me abandon any such strategic maneuver. Nevertheless, having gotten that out of the way, we began in earnest to continue what was already in place. That is, the trustees before began an effort to restore the Hayes Court and other buildings in 2000. There was a launch championed by trustee then, Mrs. Judy Chang. I was going against the grain, as I have done in my life, and gotten the requisite compensation accordingly. But the surveys showed different kinds of responses. Sometimes further surveys indicated more money, some indicated less money. Yet we continued to hope, building on the restoration launch of 2000 and expressing our sincere desire and appreciation, as well as for the many technical persons who came in to share their ideas and to explain how the task could be done without that expenditure, that high expenditure, and with great collaborative action. We entertained all and sundry. Nonetheless, we were not able to move. As a result, the committees involved, they pressed on, they became tired, we became frustrated with one another, we prayed, and then we took a rest. But in the meantime, the membership was driving this process. $1 notes, $5 notes, coins even, kept coming in, which was making a statement that his court will be restored. Of course, given the cost that I explained to you earlier, it will take a tremendous and mammoth contribution of those coins and red notes to bring us to the point of, well, where we have reached at least. But I want to say that, and that's why I'm expressing my thanks to the Prime Minister and his team. We appealed to the Prime Minister for help. And he and his team sent an emissary during the COVID, early in the morning, to say, the Prime Minister has asked me to respond. And the response might be like this: according to what you have, we can try to match you, and working together, we can get this job done. Such generosity, such kindness, we had not heard before. COVID or not, whatever responding, we were happy to hear it, and we responded accordingly. And my brothers and sisters in Christ and fellow citizens, here we are on this day, for they kept their word, and we are celebrating the commemoration and the restoration of his court on this occasion. I am sure you know that this is not a new combination of our collaborative spirit, the state and the church. In 1857, the collaboration kicked in to address the plight of orphans whose parents died during the hazardous crossing of the Atlantic Ocean. And an institution was born between the church and the state to bring relief to suffering orphans. Again, in 1890, when the government decided to establish reformatories to treat with the problem of delinquency among boys and girls, the church and the state again came together and for very many years brought a restraining spirit and a reformed spirit to many young men in our nation, of our nation. In 2001, again, the church-state collaboration came to life to successfully address the education and cultural formation of hundreds of school-age boys and girls in a particular area of this land. I am making the point that there is a template which has worked in support of nation building and community development initiatives, and to say that the church remains a viable collaborator with the state in responding to the challenges before us in these days. Today's ceremony reinforces the history of progress and good taste when collaboration is forged. Unless, of course, there came a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. And while this text is often easily abused and utilized by men of inebriation, I mention it to refer to an attitude of studied disregard and disrespect of the living stones that have built our nation and in many ways keep it going, and which can militate against the progress, good taste, and aesthetics which we celebrate on this morning. When we work together, we can move mountains. We can restore his court and others, a cathedral even. Thanks be to God for his grace and mercy. Thanks again to the Prime Minister and his government and respective agencies for their spirit of collaboration and goodwill. Thanks to the public for your kind indulgence to us in many ways. And thanks to our faithful membership for the hope, faith, and love exhibited in bringing us to this point. To God be the glory. Permit me finally to extend congratulations, blessings, and best wishes to the Spiritual Baptist community on the eve of their celebration of their holy day, Spiritual Shouter Baptist Liberation Day. And to the rest of the faithful and fellow citizens, do continue to have an inspiring and holy Lenten season, and we invite you to journey with us to the renewing experience of Easter and the renewal of our national goals and objectives. May God bless our nation. I thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Berkley. I take this opportunity to acknowledge Ministers Stuart Young, Minister Coleman Bear, and Minister Simon Denobrega. We will now have some light entertainment from the Bishop Anstey High School Choir, conducted by Ms. Adafi Patmore. Thank you very much, choir, for that beautiful rendition. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the lectern the Honorable Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley, to deliver the feature address.
Thank you very much, our Master of Ceremonies, Nigel. A very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Allow me to, first and foremost, dispense with the disappointment of my cabinet colleagues, the Honorable Stuart Young, currently serving as Minister of Energy and Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister, Member of Parliament for this area. Neighboring but equally disappointed Member of Parliament for Diego Martin North East, Minister of Finance Colin Imbert. One from Diego Martin, Simon de Nobrega, Minister of Communications. These gentlemen all disappointed that they never got to a real school. But on their behalf, coming from the bosom of the Anglican diocese, in a full school today, I understand their feelings and I comfort them by telling them, doesn't matter how good you are, you can't have everything. So ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to acknowledge the Right Reverend Claude Berkley, Bishop of Trinidad and Tobago, other members of the clergy present with us here this morning, His Worship the Mayor of Port of Spain, Alderman Joel Martinez, Mrs. Jennifer Frederick, Trustee, Mr. Noel Garcia and his team from UDICOT, including the leader, the management leader, Mrs. Tamika, and we also have some specially invited guests. I'm sure, I don't know all of you, but I'm sure on this occasion we have our specially invited guests. Thanks for coming. Members of the media for covering the event. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, youth. Today is a very happy day for me and for all Anglicans, and I dare say all members of the national community in Trinidad and Tobago. Because as you would have heard and probably cringed when you discovered that this building which we have restored and are presenting to the national community in this way today was almost pulled down. Even in thought, that was a reprehensible thought. But seriously, its sister building next door, Millefleur, came even closer to being pulled down. Because when the government, under the leadership of the cabinet, took the decision to find the resources and the will to preserve our legacy, our priceless legacy, the government subcommittee team of the cabinet had engineering surveys done on the building next door. And the engineers came back with a similar thought and advice that Millefleur could not be saved. The dilapidation had gone so far that it had to be pulled down. So terrible was that thought that the government resisted acting on that recommendation and decided to have a second opinion from outside of the country. And we invited our friends in Cuba to have a look at it, to see if we could have. The same way the bishop was reviewed in his thought. We reviewed Millefleur, and the Cubans told us that Millefleur could be saved. And today, both buildings have been restored, renovated, strengthened, and are presented to the population as the completion of our work on the Magnificent Seven. Because you see, they're called the Magnificent Seven. If you are in that seven, you have to be magnificent. And Millefleur and Hayes Court are magnificent. And in the bishop's feature address, I should say, we were reminded, and young ones educated, of a valuable collaboration through history of the church and the state in Trinidad and Tobago. Recently, I was reading a text from someone who was advising a United Nations body on how communities could restore themselves and sustain their existence by government and non-government organizations taking responsibility for what has to be done in a nation. And nearly all of what they were recommending to be done, I simply said, but in Trinidad and Tobago, we have done that. We are living that. It was advice about education, about social services, about national security, how the state could not by itself assume full responsibility and get things done without the involvement and sharing of the responsibility and assuming of some of that responsibility by other persons within the nation. Trinidad and Tobago has a great history of that kind of collaboration. May have been brought on by the requirements of the circumstances of the time, but it had turned out to be a wonderful model. And ladies and gentlemen, it is still paying great dividends. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have by practice, by precedent, seen the state using the taxpayer resources, the national resources from the national patrimony, sharing it with persons of all persuasions. Today, it is the Anglican diocese that is celebrating the involvement of the cabinet's decision, because it would have been a painful punch in the solar plexus of the nation had the Anglican decision been to take this building down. The entire nation would have mourned that action. And because we have been able to save these buildings, restore them to their glory and magnificence, every child, every adult in this nation is richer for that outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, a lot of things happen and are required to happen in our community. But it's not always about money. Money is a driving force. Money is a requirement to pay for the actions to be taken, but sometimes it is that intangible, the will and the patience. If they are there, we can get things done even when the money is not available in front of us. I say that because as I led the cabinet during the period 2016 to today, this has been a very difficult period for us, and it continues to be a very difficult period for us. But I want to thank my colleagues in the cabinet for agreeing with me that it matters not what difficulty we are going through during this period, but we have to find the resources because we have the will to do certain things which in our responsibility and our existence are requirements of the highest priority. And against that background, I can say so far we've made it, and we are making it. And we can look today at President's House in its magnificence. We may not remember that President's House is abandoned for years. And when the subcommittee of the cabinet assumed the responsibility to ensure that that situation ends, we took 7 truckloads of garbage out of President's House. Because President's House is being used as Labas number 2. Because garbage was being stored in there. 7 truckloads. Today, President's House is a place which we all can be proud. And it engenders a sense of satisfaction, pride, and I dare say patriotism, or it ought to do that for every citizen in Trinidad and Tobago. The Parliament is a sight to behold, in picture or in real. And as you walk past Woodford Square and you turn west to the Parliament, I'm sure it tingles something in you that our Parliament is worthy of the name and the building is worthy of the assembly. And I say the same today, that whatever thoughts the bishop may have in his court, such thoughts are embellished. And whatever views we have of this street, maybe the name should be changed to High Street, Port of Spain, because this is where the height of our preservation lies. And we have been entrusted as an independent nation to keep these going. And each government is entrusted to ensuring that they are preserved largely in the state in which they have been built. And the 8th building, while not being as magnificent as these, is our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which we have converted the Agriculture Ministry into a place of great honor, where our foreign guests can come to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and know that in Port of Spain, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is not behind any old building somewhere, because foreign affairs is as important in many instances as local affairs. So this part of Port of Spain has been rebuilt at great cost, I should say, because it's not cheap. Restoration is expensive, but it's worth every dollar. And the effect it will have on us ought to be a good effect. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the UDICOT team, the Urban Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago, which was brought into being as a state entity to do exactly this, which is to bring about a resurgence of urban development, either building new buildings, protecting old ones, or encouraging us to appreciate the importance of the urban space in our nation. I know there were times when the thought was that we should disperse and disengage, but as a trained geographer, understanding that a capital city is an economy by itself, and if we are in fact to be worthy of the name of a nation, there has to be that place where our thoughts and our actions are centralized for the better. And that is why the policy of the government, this government, is not to disembowel the capital city, but to strengthen it and to have within it all those common features for persons from Charlottesville and Cedros, from Sangre Grande to Carenage, will know that there's a place in this country where our interest is centralized for the better. But it would not serve me well this morning if I have this opportunity to mention that significant state resources go in the recurrent expenditure to ecclesiastical bodies for a variety of developmental activities, whether it is for religious ceremonies, supporting buildings, but mainly, I think the largest amount goes into preserving the ecclesiastical body's role in education. As you know, the single largest piece of the national budget is in education. And a significant part of that is spent on the educational effort of many ecclesiastical bodies. The Catholic Church has its responsibility, the Anglican Church, the Mahasabha, the Presbyterian, and so on. And that is a foundational expenditure in this country, which without it, I shudder to think what would have been our circumstance. Because if they don't take us all to heaven, because that's one huge task, they certainly hold us to the best that we can be on earth. And Trinidad and Tobago is one nation. I don't think there's another country in the world where the religious bodies play such a significant role in the state's commitment to providing educational opportunities to all its children. It's a unique situation that we take for granted. And today I want to thank the Anglican Diocese for your contribution, but to say to you that you have more to do. There's much more to do, because this is the time when, in the absence of proper schooling and parenting, we are losing a significant portion of our young people. Many of our young people are being raised in homes where the parents do not pay any attention to the upbringing of those children, boys and girls. And when those children come out into the national community, you see the deficiency. It's also a time in the history of the human race where religion plays a less and lesser role. And I'm not here speaking as a religious zealot or a member of any clergy. I go into religious churches, I react, and I'm also a member of a religion, and I was raised by a number of religions, and I do know that the teaching of the religious bodies would have contributed to that period of what we call the old-time days, when the kinds of behavior that we see now in our population was not the behavior that we've been accustomed to. And if for any reason, and if that is the only reason why we encourage religion in our national community, then that's a good enough reason. And many young people today are suffering from the existence of the vacuum, where what religion was doing in engendering in young people an understanding that there is good and that there is evil, that there is truth and there is falsehood, that there's ambition and there's lack of ambition, and that there's respect and disrespect, and encourage them to differentiate between both sides and to take a side. In the absence of that, the behavior in the national community is deteriorating and deteriorating rapidly, because nothing useful is filling the vacuum that is left by the absence of the recognition of those comparisons. So today, I want to call on the bishop, to call on his colleagues to assume a greater responsibility in calling on the national community, especially parents, to take responsibility for their progeny, and not just raise them and let them loose on the national community and hope that the teacher succeeds, or worse, that the police succeeds. Because too many instances of the drug dealer, the gang leader, or the ne'er-do-well succeeding in replacing what the churches used to do. I don't say this to denigrate anyone or to place blame on any particular sector of the national community. It's a responsibility that we all have, and we should take note of what is happening to us. We have the beauty of our children. We need to preserve that. We have the beauty of our country. We should preserve that. And we should disregard those who tell you that Trinidad and Tobago is not a real place. Trinidad and Tobago is one of the finest nations in the world with the best prospect if we only acknowledge what has been bequeathed to us. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many days when the difficult situations stand in front of us as insurmountable. But today is one of those days that we should leave these gates as we go with a smile on our faces. Because we've saved a magnificent building. We have presented a masterpiece. And I trust that the door will be open on these compounds to those who really appreciate them and would like to draw nearer. For our 60th anniversary of our nation, we had an art exhibition that spread across 3 of these buildings. And hopefully one day, in the not too distant future, Hayes Court will join such, whether it is for musical, whether it is for art, whether it is for religion, that we meet in this place. Because this street, this road, this Queen's Park West, is one of the best locations, not built by us, but let it be said, not ignored by us, preserved by us, appreciated by us, for the benefit of those in uniform this morning who will pass it on to and let them say that those of us who had the opportunity, found the resources, had the will, found the time, used the skills to ensure that we've lost not one brick from this tremendous inheritance. Thank you for the opportunity to work with you. And I heard that you intend to use the president with the cathedral. I hear you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's enjoy today and continue to enjoy the beautiful country of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for your feature address, as usual, for your insight and vision. Thank you, honorable members of the Cabinet, members of the Parliament and the Senate for your participation. Thank you, Mayor Martinez, Mrs. Frederick and the Right Reverend Claude Berkley for your informative remarks. Thank you, Archdeacon Edwin Primus, for the opening prayer. Special thanks to all the contractors on this project, to the CEO and members of staff of UDCOT and all who work so diligently to make today's ceremony a reality. To members of the clergy, captains of industry and commerce, to the Anglican community, Bishop's Annecy School Choir, Trinity College East, and Bishop's Annecy High School East, a hearty thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media and listening public, thank you again for your very kind participation. We will now have the cutting of the ribbon, after which the Prime Minister and his entourage will proceed to the area for the unveiling of the commemorative plaque.
The sound of my voice. is TTT. Live for local.
50 by 20, 50 by 25.